What's up, guys? I'm CandidCrandell, and today I'm going to be talking about Pretty Little Liars Season 5, Episode 4, Thrown from the Ride. You know the drill. If you haven't seen the episode yet and you don't want me to spoil anything for you, you should pause this video right now and come back after you've seen the episode. We get to see Hannah's new look. She now has black streaks on the underside of her hair and the top is like a more platinum blonde. Kind of hoping maybe she'd do something like a little bit more drastic, but I love this look too, and I'm just happy for her that she's taking the opportunity to figure out who she is. Hannah finds Shauna's copy of The Scarlet Letter at the book sale, and there's a part that she's underlined about hate and love being basically the same thing because they both come from passion. Interesting, because that definitely seems like something that she was maybe underlining not just for taking notes in school, but in reference to Allie, the girls, Jenna. Mona sees them reading it and says that perhaps they should buy it for Allie because since she's coming back to school, maybe she needs it to help her catch up. Part of me thinks that Mona isn't necessarily just talking about the fact that Allie will need to read the book for school. Mona mentions that she thinks that Shauna transferred back to Georgia. I'm wondering if she is just playing like she was with Allie's abduction story, because we all know that she knew that wasn't true and she was talking like it was. Or does she really not know that Shauna is dead? That seems somewhat unlikely to me just because you could Google Shauna and find that she was found dead in a theater in New York. Allie is going through her old clothing and giving a bunch of it away. She wants a clean slate. Mr. De Laurentiis asks if perhaps she's moving too fast, she should wait, and Allie says something about the fact that the clothes don't even fit her anymore and she's not the same girl she was 2 years ago. Very interesting, because her behavior would suggest to me that she's still very similar to the girl from 2 years ago, except maybe more street smart. She had to live on her own for 2 years, and regardless of whatever she was doing, I doubt she was hanging out at a 5-star hotel just lounging about. Allison says that she wants to go back to Rosewood High, and Mr. De Laurentiis is like, don't you maybe want like a new start somewhere else? I was thinking that we could move and give you the opportunity to start fresh. Allie seems really against this idea and is like, you can't take me away from my friends, I can't lose my friends too. Veronica Hastings is not sleeping at all as her backyard is still an active crime scene. Spencer tries to talk to her mom about how Melissa and her dad have been acting strangely, and Mrs. Hastings doesn't seem to want to hear about it at all, which suggests to me that she already knows. Mrs. Hastings thinks that the only secret that Melissa is keeping is that she got back together with Ren. Right in the middle of Mrs. Hastings' conversation with Spencer, Mr. Hastings comes down into the room and is like, what's the matter? Or should I say, what's the matter now? Okay, dude, you're the one that's keeping all these secrets and making sketchy conversations and getting drunk and upset and weird. What's the matter with you now? Not what's the matter with me. Mrs. Hastings wants Toby to come and redo their backyard after the crime scene is finished. Spencer says that he's actually out of town on a job. Toby's out of town on a lot of jobs. That's a little sketchy, but I also think it's because Keegan Allen was on Broadway in a play, and I think that might be part of it. Mrs. Hastings says to Spencer, let's just focus on the things we can control. I feel like that is like the Hastings family motto. Let's just focus on the things we can control. The House of Hastings. Lucas and Mona have another scene together, and Lucas is saying to Mona that he thinks that maybe they should call the whole thing off. Lucas actually believes Allie's abduction story. It's hard to see Allie as the devil when she just escaped from hell. Mona says to Lucas that Allie wasn't kidnapped and that she has proof. What proof does she have? I am super sketched out about this. It may just be the fact that she knows that they were in New York, but if she knows that they were in New York, then she probably knows that Shauna's dead and that Aria killed her. Mona says that she sees her army as a preventative measure, not a punishment for Allie for the things that she did before. All right, Mona, you tell yourself whatever you need to make you feel okay about what you're doing, but you're kind of doing the same thing that Allie did, except on an even bigger scale because you're actively planning it out. At least Allie just kind of came up with it on the fly. She would insult people based on observations that she made in the moment, but Mona has to sit here and like strategically plan out ways to bring people down. Emily is coaching Sydney with swimming and she has a couple run-ins with Paige. Really wanting Sydney to be the bridge between Paige and Emily, and from what I've been reading online, that seems to be what's going to happen. Fingers crossed. Sydney says to Emily that it's kind of normal that her mom would have questions about Allie now that she's back, and she's like, you know, it's not like I don't have questions, but I'd never ask them. And that whole statement just seemed like a way of her being like, well, I have questions, but I'd never ask, but if you wanted to just like confide in me and tell me, I would totally be interested in listening. So while I think that Sydney is good for Paley, and I like that about her, I am also a little hesitant as to why she's so interested in this whole Allie thing. Is she potentially a friend of Sarah Harvey's? Emily ignores Allie's phone call. Yeah, you go, girl. I'm really happy that she hasn't just been like throwing herself at Allison again. The girls are sitting at lunch when they all get a text at the same time and they freak out and they're like, could it possibly be A? Oh my god, oh my god. Spencer checks it and is like, oh no, it's just Allie. Time out. Is that a clue? Allie's texting the girls to let them know that the coroner's report on her mom came back as inconclusive. There was no real sign of like physical trauma, so they're doing a tox screen to figure out whether or not she was poisoned. Oh my gosh, poor Mrs. D. I actually feel like really bad for her. Even though she buried Allie alive, I didn't want her to die just yet. Mostly because I wanted answers as to why she would bury Allie alive. Hannah points out that she doesn't think that any member of the Hastings family would kill someone and then bury them in their own backyard. Very astute, Hannah. I don't think they would either. If one of the Hastings did do it, they probably buried her somewhere else and A, moved her body. Allie is sitting in her room sending a text to Emily asking her to please call her back. She starts to sign it. She types -A and pauses and then continues to type out Allison. Why does she feel the need to sign her texts? Also, was that pause because she wasn't used to having to finish writing her name? I don't know that we would get a clue that is this obvious, but maybe that's what it is. I've always thought that Allie had something to do with A, not in just being a victim of A way. It would not surprise me if this is a hint at the fact that Allie is more actively involved in the A game than she previously admitted. Allie needs to have a medical exam for the police. Of course she does. If you are going to say that you were kidnapped and held hostage for 2 years, of course they're going to want to do a medical exam to try to get the person's DNA off of you and try to find the creep. Allie tells her dad that she really doesn't want to have the medical exam. And I think he perceives it as like, oh, she's been through a traumatic event. And I think it's because Allie's like, how do I fudge this? Like, how do I lie about medical details? I actually am really starting to feel bad for Mr. DeLaurentis. I don't know if he was involved in something shady, but it really does seem like he is genuinely hurting over the fact that he thinks that someone may have done something terrible to his daughter. He says to Allie that if she was hurt, she needs to tell somebody. Not necessarily him, but just somebody. She says, don't worry, Dad, nothing like that happened. This is a red flag for me. I could see Allie lying about being raped if she hadn't been, just to make people feel even more bad for her. So the fact that she is loudly proclaiming that nothing like that happened, something bad probably did happen. Who knows if the story that she told the girls is even right. After her dad leaves the room, Allie starts to cry. Real low point, something is not right, crying. Andrew is back in this episode. He is talking to Spencer and she asks him to help redo the Hastings backyard since Toby is out of town, and he agrees. Aria is on the computer at school and gets a message from someone that says, if it was me, I would never be able to forget. She thinks that it's someone who knows that she killed Shauna, and it turns out that it's this girl Becca from her AP history class just making a comment about Allison and what she went through. Not at all talking about Shauna, so get it together, Aria. After getting this message, you know what Aria does? She decides to search Shauna on the internet and finds a video of her funeral service. Searching for it is bad enough, but the girl watches it. After all the interactions that the girls have had with the police over the years, you would think that they would start to realize which things they do can be used as evidence against them and makes them look sketchy. For example, if you killed a girl, the last thing you need to be doing is looking her up on the computer and watching her funeral service. No, you weren't good friends, so that looks weird. It's like they're asking for jail time. Aria is watching the video of Shauna's funeral service and she hallucinates seeing Shauna sit up in the casket and like look directly at her. It's terrifying, it's terrifying, it's so creepy. Side note though, I kind of want them to do something like that with the intro from now on. Have Allie sitting up out of her casket now that she's alive Anybody with me on that? Lucas is back at Rosewood High, says that homeschooling wasn't for him. It really was a game changer for him when his mom could both ground him and flunk him. Fair enough, Lucas. Fair enough. I am very glad to see Lucas back, even if he is involved in the A-Team or Mona's army or whatever in some way. I still really like the dude. Allie calls Hannah and begs her to go to her medical exam with her, and she also says something like, nobody else would pick up, I really need someone to go with me. So not only are you asking a favor from Hannah, but you're also going to like degrade her while you ask. For whatever reason, Hannah agrees, and I'm kind of getting annoyed with Hannah chauffeuring Allie around everywhere, but when she's ready to be done with it, I think that Hannah will be done with it. Paige, Emily, and Sydney do sprints on the track together. Yay, Haley hanging out. And then they go out for lunch together afterwards. Spencer and Andrew are working on her parents' backyard, and they're in the shed when they see a dead possum. Andrew looks and finds a tub of rodenticide that it looks like the possum got into. It's rat poison, obviously. And what is it doing in the Hastings garden shed? It says on the bucket that it was purchased last week, and the sketchiness continues. Spencer's like, we've never had a rat problem, so why is there rat poison here? I would guess that Mr. Hastings or Melissa had something to do with it. Apparently, Mrs. Hastings was looking at getting a $10,000 alarm system, and Spencer says she's not sure if her mother is more afraid of what's outside the house or inside the house. Finding the rat poison in the shed makes Spencer think that maybe Mrs. De Laurentiis was poisoned with the rat poison. Allie goes to her medical exam with Hannah, and the doctor says that she has extremely powerful lungs. No duh, she has extremely powerful lungs. Girl was buried alive and lived to tell the tale, so. The doctor looks at Allie's head injury, and he says that he wants her to come back in for an x-ray of the scar tissue to see if there's any remnants of whatever caused the wound still in there. Aria points out that Emily has been kind of MIA when it comes to Allie's return to Rosewood. And Emily's like, well, so have you. All the girls have been. I don't think any of them are really sure what to do now that she's back. Emily says that this is what they'd always hoped for, a life without A, and to have Allie back. That she thought that it would be like it was before, but it's not. Aria asks Emily about Nate and if she was super obsessed with finding out everything she could about him after she ended his life. Emily tells her about a package that she received from Nate's mom and how hard it was for her to read the letter and to know that she had taken her son away. The doctor continues to examine Allie and notices a big scar on her inner thigh. And he says that there's no mention of that scar or an injury in the police report, and Allie's like, oh, I didn't even think about it, but she looks kind of panicked. He asks her how she got it. Allie says that she must have cut it on a rock the night that she escaped from her captor and jumped out of the car blindfolded. The doctor's like, well, that doesn't really look like it's a month old, one, because it's like pretty healed scar tissue. And he also said that it didn't look like a puncture wound from a rock, but that it looked like more of like a slice from a blade of a knife or something like that. Allie gets really defensive and is like, well, I was wearing a blindfold, so I don't even know. And the doctor mentions that Allie is going to have to see a trauma counselor, which I think is really good because I think she could use that. And maybe it will be Dr. Sullivan. Will we see her back? Mrs. Hastings says that she has a sick feeling in her stomach and it hasn't gone away since they found Jessica's body in their backyard. Understandable. I'm also wondering if that sick feeling in her stomach has something to do with rodenticide. I really, really hope not, because that would be just like seriously messed up. Mrs. Hastings reveals to Spencer that after Allie went missing, Jessica De Laurentiis came to their house and accused Spencer of being the one to hit Allie over the head with a rock. Mr. Hastings told her that if she went to the police or told anyone, that he would tell her husband Ken about the affair. But now that Mr. De Laurentiis was divorcing Jessica, and now that Allie was alive, what kept her from going to the police is what Mrs. Hastings wants to know. She doesn't want to think that Peter had anything to do with it, but I think there's a part of her that is sincerely like, did my husband do this? Because he would have a lot of motive to. Essentially, Mrs. De Laurentiis was trying to frame Spencer because we know that she saw who hit Allie over the head, and we know that it wasn't Spencer. Who was Mrs. De Laurentiis trying to protect that she was willing to throw Spencer under the bus for? As Allie and Hannah are getting ready to leave the doctor's office, Allie pulls out a tape recorder that she used to record the entire exam, including the time that she was in the doctor's office answering questions. She tells Hannah Hannah that she wants her to take the tapes and make copies and give them to all the girls so that they can memorize them. Excuse me? Excuse me? What? No, that is going way too far, Allie. Absolutely freaking ridiculous. Your lie is so intricate that you needed to record it so that people can listen to it and memorize it so that nobody gets in trouble. Hannah asks Allie where she got the scar on her thigh. Fair question. You just asked her to lie about like big significant things. I think you kind of at least owe her an explanation about how you got the scar that you're clearly lying about. Allie says, I wish I was blindfolded when I got that scar. Hannah, once you know something, you can't unknow it. Trust me, I wish I could. I think that whoever gave her that scar is someone that everybody probably knows, and it would be earth-shattering for people to find out who it was, potentially. Spencer is researching rodenticide on her laptop. Again, with the researching things on your laptop, that if somebody turns up dead and there's rodenticide in their system, it's gonna make you look sketchy. Spencer, you are the smartest in the group. You live in a family of lawyers. You should know better than to do that. You should know that if your mom or Mrs. De Laurentiis or some random person shows up dead with rodenticide in their system and the search is on your computer, the police are gonna bring you in for questioning, and looking at your prior record, they're probably gonna think it's you. Paige has a confrontation with Mona where Mona tells her that she doesn't get to be some sort of social Switzerland. If she's not with her, she's against her. Paige says, Mona, I'm just curious, do you ever wonder when you became the very thing that you fear? Boom. Great question, Paige. Does Mona realize that she has essentially become Allison De Laurentiis? Mona and Allison have a lot more in common than I think either one of them wants to admit. That's partially why they butt heads so much. Aria decides to have a marathon of Shauna's funeral video again and again and again and again, and I just don't know why she is doing this to herself. Allie tells Spencer that they got the tox screen back, and it was revealed that someone had messed with Mrs. De Laurentiis' heart medication. Mrs. De Laurentiis apparently had low blood pressure, and the pills that they found in her system were actually pills for the opposite, so it caused her heart to stop. Who would have access to pills like that? Dr. Ren Kingston, I presume? Or maybe it has something to do with the prescription pads of Ren's that were sent to somebody in a black hoodie. I think we all thought that part of that was because of Spencer's drug addiction, but who's to say that that prescription pad wasn't used once again to change Jessica De Laurentiis' medication? It's very possible that either Melissa or Peter Hastings connected with Ren to get that medication. I mean, it may be as deep as the fact that Melissa got the medication from Ren and told her dad about it, and her dad decided to use it. Allie says to Spencer, did you think your dad did it? It's hard, isn't it, knowing that your parent could be capable of something like that? Aria goes to see Ezra and talk to him about how she's struggling over the Shauna thing still. It's very interesting because where they had left things before he got shot, she didn't want to see him ever again. I, for one, am glad that they are seeing more of each other. Ezra tries to talk some sense into Aria and tells her that she shouldn't be watching the funeral video over and over and that she's just gonna have to figure out a way to forgive herself. Paige goes to warn Emily about Allie's return to Rosewood High. People are preparing for her return, and it's not with balloons and banners. She doesn't rat anybody out. She says that she's not going to do that, but she's also not going to participate in it actively. I kind of like where Paige is at this point, but I think she's going to soon realize that if she wants to survive, she's gonna have to pick a side. Someone is lurking in the shadows while Emily and Paige are having this conversation. I really hope for Paige's sake that it's not Mona, because if Mona just overheard her ratting her out, essentially, Mona's not gonna be very happy. Hannah is at the mall trying to put together a new look, and she decides to steal the shirt that she is looking at. One, I'm really upset that she is like going back to that place where she was at the beginning of all of this, because she shouldn't be stealing, she knows better. And also, the top that she stole is just not cute. Aria calls Shauna's church and tries to donate money anonymously to her services. Aria, stop. Just stop. You are gonna convict yourself. Ezra comes in when she's on the phone and tells her to stop doing that. And he also points out that if Shauna's family was going to forgive Aria, they wouldn't do it because of a donation. Ezra talks to Aria about how hard it was for him to try and forgive himself after she found out about the book. He realized that she might never forgive him. I don't know if he's being sincere, I hope he is, or he might just be being manipulative. I'm going to choose to see the good in Ezra Fitz and believe that it's because he really loves her. I'm also wondering if the thing that he had to forgive himself for, yes, was Arya finding out about the book, but he could have had another situation in his life where he had to forgive himself for something pretty awful. Ezra and Arya play checkers, and then he says that they can also play chess, and I think that this is interesting because wasn't A playing checkers or chess at some point, someone in a black hoodie? Spencer is looking through the cabinets in her house and finds a bottle full of the pills that Allie said were found in Mrs. De Laurentiis' system. Either someone in the Hastings house gave her those pills, or someone in the Hastings house is getting framed. Arya is whooping Ezra's butt in gin. She tells him that it's because he's just not very good at the game. And Ezra says, "Did I mention I'm recovering from a gunshot wound? That might affect my game." It might affect your game playing ability, but it definitely doesn't affect your game, if you know what I'm saying. Arya asks Ezra if she can stay over on the couch, obviously. He says okay and gets out her favorite shirt that she used to like to wear when she stayed over before. Aww. So, you know, naturally I am bouncing off the walls happy, thinking that we're about to have an Ezra sleepover again, finally. And my heart is just soaring into the sky. And then Arya's like, actually, you know what, never mind, I'm just gonna go. And then my heart broke. You'll be back, Arya. You'll be back. Emily talks to Allison about how it could be good for her to get a fresh start somewhere else because she doesn't necessarily think it is safe for Allie here. And Allie asks Emily if she even wants to have her here because it really doesn't seem like it. I can get where Allie would see that, but Allie also has to recognize that the things that she did to Emily were potentially worse than things she did to anyone else. Like, she manipulated Emily's heart. Allie says to Emily, if we just stick together, everything will be fine. It really seems like Allie is using her friends as a crutch at this point and pretty much is relying on them to make things okay for her. Emily agrees to memorize the tape that Allie gives her, but says that this is the last time that she's ever doing something like that for Allie. And I'm really hoping that she's going to stand by that. Spencer tells Arya about how Mrs. De Laurentiis was trying to frame her for Allison's murder and how she thinks her dad might have done something to prevent Mrs. De Laurentiis from telling the police. Of course, during this conversation, Mr. Hastings comes back to the house, because that's what he does, drops in at really inopportune, creepy moments. And he says that Mrs. Hastings is away at the spa for a few days, and that Spencer is not to call her or bother her. What? No. After you've lived in Rosewood for long enough, if someone just happens to go away and you're not allowed to call or text them, you get freaked out. Does spa equal Radley, or what? According to Mr. Hastings, Mrs. Hastings snapped at the cops when they were finishing the crime scene and leaving, and she was lucky he was there so that they didn't press charges. I'm interested as to what kind of outburst she had, or if that even happened at all, because right now Mrs. Hastings isn't even here to speak for herself, so all we have to go off of is Peter Hastings' word, which is, let's face it, not super reliable. At the end of the episode, we see Allie looking at the online forum discussing her disappearance again. She's not crying this time and not looking sad, and I can't tell if she's really affected by what is being said or if she's kind of loving the attention. I am super excited for next week's 100th episode. It looks like it is going to be absolutely crazy. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of this week's episode. Do you have any theories, any questions? I would love to talk to you about them. If you don't already, you can follow me on Twitter, Tumblr, Blogspot, and Instagram, username CandidCrandell. And if you are as obsessed with Pretty Little Liars as I am, you can chat with me live during new episodes on Beamly every Tuesday. Link down in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you again on Tuesday. Bye!